This is a review for Geekay Esports at Geekay Esports against Falcons at the most recent OWCS. It was a very close match that ended up in 3-2 for Falcons, and Falcons later end up winning the whole championship, which means that if Geekay played a little bit better, they might have had a chance to win the whole thing. Pretty strong chance. In this review, I'm going to be focusing on big, reoccurring, fundamental mistakes. I'm not going to be focusing on the micro of somebody messed up a cooldown or somebody took 2 steps to the right or missed some shots. These players are good. They are aware of when they miss a cooldown or miss a shot. I'm going to be focusing on things and show you exactly what you could have done in order to beat Falcons. And I'm also going to show you good plays that you have made that led you to actually beat Falcons on some of these maps and these team fights. I'm not going to be showing the entire match. I'm going to be showing specific examples of mistakes and good plays. So here, standard play, they try to wall up the Ramatra. It worked, but Ramatra is a very, very tanky hero. What I like about this is that you realize he's not going to die. You force the ring, you force some cooldowns, you just kite back to get healed up and reset your own cooldowns. Good job. Now, you try to make the same play again over here. Watch this from Kaffa's perspective. You try to wall, you rush it a little bit. And the only reason why you end up winning this team fight, as you can see, is because Proper overextended on the off angle. So when Proper uses a wall on the off angle and then ice block, he forces a lot of resources from his team. Fielder, Chio, and Merit come to his help. This lets Lethal kill Merit because Merit is busy protecting Proper and shooting at Kaffa. So because he was not paying attention, he died. This was a very, very good play to go on Proper, and that is why you mostly win the fight. So this fight was very, very difficult to lose, if I'm being honest. What went wrong here is simply the window positioning. So instead of positioning the window right here in the middle, they're obviously gonna go around the corner into an open space. If you wait, if you wall first, try to kill him, and then they go around the corner, and then you put the window around the corner, the likelihood of them winning 5-on-4 is not very likely. Maimon ends up getting picked, and if the window was there around the corner, they would have won the fight pretty reliably, because they couldn't have sustained the damage. So Maimon got picked, they wait for him, and then they try to take the fight. Kappa is taking a pretty good space here. So here, you guys use 2 ultis, they use 1. Kappa is not giving space, pretty good. Really good pick. Notice the Merit overextends, get the kill, good pull as well. So here, they use Mei ulti, and they use Juno ulti. All you have to do is kite it back, which you kind of do. Ultraviolet gets caught. It's alright. Still 1-for-1. Very winnable. You then use your Mei ulti because, well, they just overextended. They don't have a lot, so you guys can use the Mei ulti pretty reliably. I'm not sure where it goes. But you guys take angles, apply continuous pressure, a good exchange of cooldowns. I really like how the fight is being played out here. So this was a very, very good fight. Good exchange of cooldowns. You basically capitalize on the fact that they had no cooldowns. They used more ultis than you. After they used their ultis, you kited, and then you re-engage with your own ultis. And Kappa put a really, really good shield here to cut off the healing, which lead you to killing the enemy ram. Pretty good fight. Very disciplined, very patient. Good job. So here, Ultraviolet seems like he wants to explode with a window. He finds Kiriko, pokes her out, force Suzu. Force Suzu means, guys, let's go. There should be a call. Guys, they use Suzu. Let's go. Probably a TP as well because she was low. Ultraviolet explodes with a window. Phenomenal window. Proper reacts accordingly. Good job. But at this point, they have no Suzu. They have no window. They kite back. You just simply run them over because the initial damage from the window and already poking before on fielder and forcing 2 cooldowns, you just run them over. I just want you to pay attention that when you guys force cooldowns and then explode with ultimates from a range that you can capitalize on, you run Falcons over pretty easily. This was a fantastic fight. First off, I really like the angle that Lethal has took. You guys do very, very good in terms of the off angles that you take. You never just kind of stay together. You constantly try to take angles, which leads up to you capitalizing on people that don't pay attention like Lethal just did. Also, Kappa creates a lot of these opportunities because he draws a lot of aggression to himself. He's becoming the punching bag. He's taking a fairly aggressive position. Everyone looks at him and Lethal capitalizes. The fight started with you guys using a tree, and then they use Mei ulti. I'd like you to pay attention to when the ultis are obviously that you have to kite from. Mei ulti is something you have to kite from. You play it very, very well. They throw a Mei ulti, you kite, and then you re-engage and explode together with your own cooldowns, with your own ultimates if you have, right? This will be important later down the line. Here you see that I used a ring and an nemesis form to use cooldowns, and you engage with your Mei ult in the ring. I really, really like that play. So they use Juno ulti, they use Mei ult, they use ring, they used almost every single cooldown imaginable. Granted, you use lamp and use pull. However, you do have your window. Because they almost have no cooldowns, UV has to put his window around the corner. This enables your team to capitalize on the fact that they have no cooldowns, increase kill potential. But even if they don't die, they just kite back, and then Ramatra is completely separated, and you guys can punish him. You kind of end up winning the fight because someone overextends. This very rarely happens to him. He doesn't tend to overextend. But he also still used Nemesis form, and you barely won that. I mean, you end up not winning that because they use Mei ulti. It was a nice push. They used Mei ulti. They played it really nice. But the only reason why you won the initial exchange is because you used more ultimates and also someone overextended. This was a fantastic play. UV goes to the off angle while Kappa is applying pressure from the front, completely surprises Fielder and Merit. The problem is that UV just engaged too early. He should have waited 1 second for Lethal to show up so they could both explode in the same position, and then for sure they kill Merit there. UV just got a little bit too greedy, engaged too early, Lethal was not ready. Now, let's jump to this segment, and you're going to see literally a fight later how UV takes the same angle and why this works this time. UV goes to the off angle, and he pops right when everyone else explodes. The enemies are too busy dealing with Kappa and the rest of the teammates. No one is looking at him. He pops exactly at the right time, and that's why his angle is so good. I like that he went back here as well. I want you to notice the angles that everyone is taking. You have Maimon on the left. I think Lethal is on the top right. Kappa is pushing forward. And UV is at the back, applying a lot of pressure. Sorry, Lethal was top left. So this is overtime, and notice how fundamentally sound you play this. You explode from multiple angles at the same time, utilize your cooldowns correctly, capitalize off each other's distraction and damage and cooldowns, and essentially Falcons are the one that are freaking out. Granted, they lost one, but still they're freaking out with the cooldowns. They don't know what to do. They don't manage to react properly. Patience, discipline, exploding together, creating multiple angles. Fantastic. I don't hate the idea of holding over there. It's risky, but it has its benefits. You also can take a lot of time off the clock, especially with the Admiral pull. But if you're UV, you have to trust Admiral to be able to pull you. UV here uses the lamp and they pull together. So now he dies because he doesn't have his lamp. And also, even if he survived, Kaffa very likely to die because he doesn't have his lamp. So you have to make sure you actually trust your teammates with their cooldowns. As you can see, a fight and a half later, UV puts a lamp and then Admiral also pulls. They are very, very big cooldowns and are necessary, especially when you play the Lifeweaver comp. You have to separate them. It's like doing a Lucio and Zenyatta ulti at the same time. It should not ever happen. You have to make a call in advance and say something along the lines of I lamp first or I pull first. Falcons actually play this really, really poorly. They use Freya ulti, and you play more defensive because they use Freya ulti, and you take a lot more distance. And then they use Kitsune. Why was this a bad Kitsune? Because you're all far away. They can't capitalize on anything with the Kitsune. And then UV waits a second and a half, let them extend it to an open space because they're confident with the Kitsune, and then they get exploded with a window. That's very, very good play. And I want you to remember these type of Kitsunes for the future. So again, they use ultis, they messed up the ultis, you kite, you're patient, boom, you explode with your own ultis. Great job. Because you were aggressive initially, you kind of forced them to commit because they believe they can catch you with a Mei ulti. So they use the Mei ulti and they get no value from it. Lethal pops overclock from the off angle because they're committing with their Mei ulti, which then forces the Juno ulti because Lethal is in a very aggressive position, so they have to do it. You then use your Mei ulti. So, yes, Yubi was half a second late on this lap. Yubi is a good player, he understands it, he messed up the lamp. I don't need to mention it. Proper is now stuck. You guys see that Suzu, no TP on the off angle, and Proper is stuck. No cooldowns. Great. You pushed them. Fantastic fight. It was a very, very close fight. You ended up winning because you used your cooldowns and ultimate just a little bit better than Falcons did. Why? Because they initially got no value out of their Mei ulti. And also, you just have overall better sustain at this part of the map because of the Lifeweaver. That being said, if I had to nitpick something, I think that Maimon used this Mei ulti a little bit too early. It should have let them commit with a Juno ulti a little bit more before utilizing his ulti. Venture is kind of an annoying character because she can force you to play more defensive by going underground. So they managed to push you back without using cooldowns. If I'm being nitpicky here, I think that Admiral should have pulled UV and then UV could have lamped lethal. But I still don't think you win that fight. They used 2 ultimates and Kaffa had to stay frontlining when you guys had to play more defensive. So just to clarify what happened, the enemies, Falcons, used their ring. As soon as the ring was over, Lethal decided to make a very aggressive play with Overclock because he knows that they can't kite away from it. I really like this play by Lethal. The problem is that he's going in alone. When Lethal decides to make this type of an aggressive play, you guys must follow up. It doesn't really matter if they use ultimates and beat you to it. When Lethal is there by himself, he automatically dies. The only chance of winning is if you guys push with him. So what I'm saying is that Maimon and Kaffa should have pushed together. Admiral could have been in a position to either pull Lethal or, help them on the front line, and UV could have taken another angle. This window gets no value because it was such an obvious window. When you put UV in such an aggressive position in open space, they know that he's gonna pop the window. I want you to make a comparison between this type of window and the window that was explosive on attack. When UV jumped and popped the window when they're close range, they didn't have a lot of time to react to it, which inevitably led to them getting run over. Here, they know it's coming. They have plenty of time to react. And that's also why they don't commit a lot of cooldowns. They just set Venture to go underground and force UV out of the angle. Again, another pretty poor Kitsune by Falcons. They do it from too far away. They use Ring and Kitsune. You guys perfectly cut it away. You use very minimal cooldowns. Great job. Spoiler alert, you end up winning the fight here, but this was textbook of how to win the fights. They use ultis from far away. You recognize it, you kite out of the way, and then capitalize with your own cooldowns. You did not have any ultis and coming into this fight. You had nothing. They used grab, which you amazingly managed to completely mitigate with Pero and Lamp. They use Kitsune from far away, which you kited. And now you build up your own ultimates and end up winning the fight together. UV should have not died here. It was a very obvious mistake. I know that he probably knows it, but at this type of situations in overtime, it's better to play it safer, especially when you have such a big advantage. You manage to cut off their ultimates. Also, I want to quickly mention, when they cut off the Kitsune, imagine if they had UV's window now. Would have been very helpful. The reason why this map was very good because of 4 reasons. Number 1, you played fundamentally sound. You try to initiate plays. When they don't work out, you realize you kite, you let them use their own ultimates and ability, let them waste everything, and now you have the cooldowns back, and then you capitalize on the fact that they're overextending with their ultimates and cooldowns now. And especially, you initiate them with the element of surprise. When they're already close, you pop a window. You understand? When they're already close, you pop a Mei ulti. You don't do it from far away. 2, amazing angles by Lethal, UV, and Maimon. This also is enabled by Kaffa, of course, because he's taking a lot of aggression forward and he's distracting the enemies, which allow all of these angles. And they work out really, really well when you guys explode together. You do it most of the time. However, sometimes you get too greedy and one guy picks alone instead of waiting half a second for his teammate to show up and do more explosive damage. So don't go one by one to the off angle. Play together. The third feedback is that there's a little bit too many double support utility, lamp and pull. And also the windows could have been a little bit better from UV, especially around corners and open spaces where they can't really run away from. And 4, this is a spoiler alert to the rest of the review, but you guys played overtimes perfectly. Except where UV died here at the end, you play patiently, you let them make the mistakes, you explode together from the angles and your cooldowns. And the reason why I say spoiler alert, because later down the line, you don't do it. Now moving on to Colosseo. Really like this angle by UV. UV could have kept going right side, creating a very strong off angle. Also, he's very close to Kitsune. So if they push into this area, he actually has a very good Kitsune position. Either Kitsune is from when they close distance from the off angle, or he TPs to Kaffa and then uses his Kitsune. Also, UV forced to use his Suzu for practically no reason. I know he's afraid to get one shot, but should have not used that. Could have just TP'd. If you remember how Falcons used their Kitsune, the previous map, this is exactly the same mistakes. The enemies are way too far away. You almost never, spoiler alert, manage to win fights with Kitsune when you do it from far away. But every time you do it from close range and you're able to immediately capitalize in the first second, you have such a big advantage and most of the time win these fights. You let them kite, and then you overcommit with your cooldowns because you try to run them over. And then they capitalize with their own ultimates when you overextend. And that's why you lose these type of fights. They took the robot from us. You guys have used 2 ultis for practically no reason. I really like the symmetrical, I just don't understand the beat. I think that Admiral was afraid to die, but that was mostly a positioning mistake on his part, and he should have not been that super aggressive to the point that he can die to force the beat. You should have utilized the Mei wall, and then only bit if you could have not won the fight, because they don't use any ultimates. This is something a little more experimental that Geekay can try, is that when they win a team fight and the enemies are setting up, you can set up UV on a flank, which then he can try to get a sneaky pick before the fight begins, because usually they're going to sit here on the bridge and try to poke them out. And UV can pop from here and potentially get a pick. This only has upsides because UV can just TP back to his team and end up in the same position. It's very important that he's not forced to use his Suzu though, he just TPs. He TPs back into the defensive position, so only upsides, he can get a pick, not die, not be forced to use Suzu. Could have potentially got a pick on the people over there. This was very well played by Geekay. While Admiral and UV were marking the Tracer, Kaffa was standing in the front without overextending too much. If I was nitpicky here, Kaffa could have not taken that much poke to not be forced to use Nemesis for him, which then they could have just run him over if the supports didn't come back on time. But I really like this. Kaffa stays front, denies the rest, while Admiral and UV are dealing with the Tracer. Just like 10 minutes and 18 seconds, UV uses Kitsune when the enemies are too far away. They just kite it out, or just like they don't even kite it out because they're already within a distance, all they have to do is let you guys commit with a Kitsune, and then they explode with their ultimates, with their beat and Kitsune. If they didn't have these ultimates, they would have easily cut it out, let you overextend, and then kill you with their cooldown. You have to remember that the first second of your defensive ultimate is the most important, because that's where the bulk of the damage is going to come in. If you give them time to react, they're just going to easily cut it out or mitigate your ultis with their own ulti. So you have to make sure that every time you use defensive ultis, you are within range to capitalize on it. I would argue that Falcons didn't need to use 2 ultimates. They could have just used 1 defensive instead of 2. Beat or Kitsune would have beat you, but it's their mistake. Now, I know this was an obvious mistake. However, I think that Kafa is making that mistake a little bit too much. He tends to overextend a little bit too much. I like his level of aggression because that creates a lot of space for you, and you're able to take a lot of angles because he kind of pushes the limit of how much you can push to beat the punching bag while not dying. But Kafa sometimes overdoes it, and he has to pay way more attention when he's pushing to his team. This can be easily fixed if Kafa just, sounds like a dumb moment, but flicked his mouse to check where his teammates are. I want you to observe this fight. Notice how Admiral's beat here is exactly on time. When the enemies are already close to your team, you beat and then you just run them over. Maimon TPs to the off angle, which is the cherry on top, allowed him to get a pick on Merit, but it's because Merit couldn't run away. He's just too close. And compared to the previous Kitsune, where the enemies easily cutted out your ultimates. Now, they end up winning the fight, even though you played initially well, but you have to bear in mind, they use 4 ultimates, plus you guys kind of had a split target priority. So after the initial pick on Merit, there should have been a more precise callouts on who you want to push. I want you to pay attention to something. When Proper gets a pick on Lethal, what Falcons do is pause for a second. They stabilize, they got a pick, let's not throw the advantage away. Let's decide what we want to do after the pick. They don't panic. They don't just mindlessly rush forward. Because they got a pick, UV is now forced to use his Kitsune because he wants to bring this back. But what he doesn't notice is the enemies are way too far away to be capitalized on. As you can see, there's big repetition with how the Kitsunes are being used and how similar they are to the bad Kitsunes from Falcons from last match on circuit. And the reason why I mentioned that Falcons paused there is compared it to the last fight. You guys got a pick on Merit, and then you guys just mindlessly rush forward, which then enable Falcons to essentially get picks on you because of the chaos. But because they stabilize, they can properly re-engage together. Notice how, again, you guys use a wall, they kite the wall, they sustain someone, and then re-engage with their own cooldowns because you have used up yours. Now, granted, because it's a 4-on-5, you guys are doing pretty good. But if they had any defensives here, like Beat or Kitsune, you guys would probably lost this. Really good beat by Admiral, close distance, UV pops from the off angle, 2 taps fielder. Very great job. Another Kitsune that is rushed out of panic. Enemies are too far away. This Kitsune will not be able to be utilized correctly. There's no value out of it because, again, they're too far away. So this is the second time that I watch it, but the first time that I watch it, I made a prediction. So the Kitsune is too far away. It's almost as if Falcons knows UV will use the Kitsune. They cut it out. And then I predicted that what they're going to do is cut it out, wait for them to burn the cooldowns and overextend, and then capitalize on with the beat and just run them over. which exactly what happened. So Yubi here swaps to BAP. It's a good intuition because as you've noticed, he's gaining no value out of Kitsune, and you guys are doing really, really well in BAP comps. And the reason why you guys are doing very well with BAP comps, by the way, is number one, you don't get value out of your Kitsune, you get way more value out of your window. I think the windows could be also be placed way better, but it still gets more value. And the second thing is that UV is able to create way more consistent pressure on BAP compared to Kiriko. On Kiri, he finds very low value with the damage. Is a lot on the defensive. BAP is also on the defensive, but he is doing damage while he's on the defensive, and a lot more of it. So this is the last fight. 20 seconds. It's gonna be the last fight. You guys TP to the off angle. So this is what I like to call the overtime syndrome. And what I mean by that is that when it's overtime, people tend to make the most amount of mistakes because they're under the most amount of pressure. You TP'd behind them, which was not a bad play in and of itself, but you staying there for as long as you did in an open space, they basically just used Nemesis form slow and just ran you over. You stand there completely isolated, and also isolated from Kappa, and they run you over. What you should have done is, okay, we TP'd, there's no value there, let's take TP back because you still have 10 seconds left, right? We burned some cooldowns, they burned some cooldowns, nothing happened, let's chill, let Kappa touch the point, and then we can play with our wall. You don't force yourself to make a play when you realize it's not the time for it. So you have lost this map, so what went wrong here? Number one, very low value out of Kitsunes, use them from way too far away. When you compare them to Admiral's beats, for example, you can see that you're getting significantly more value out of your beats because Admiral pops the beat when you guys are already close and they're somewhat committed. That's why you're able to run them over. With Kitsunes, they kited it out completely every single time because UV used it way too early when they're far away. What you want to do is let them get close or just initiate a close play. So for example, TP behind them close enough and then pop Kitsune. Number two, as I said, UV gets significantly more value out of BAP compared to Kiri, specifically in the damage department. So what you can do is before fight, set UV on an off angle or a flank, and then before you start the fight, and when they don't pay attention, try to get a sneaky kill. And if it doesn't work out, just TP out without using your Suzu. Number three, at this map, and also spoiler alert, next map, Kappa tends to overextend a little bit too much. Generally has good intuition, but he tends to not pay attention to where his team is, which easily can be fixed by just flicking his mouse here and there to look where his team is to make sure, okay, I can overextend here. So now you guys are playing the Hazard comp. Lethal gets a phenomenal pick. So notice you guys slowly poke them out, push them back, and just explode together, which is why you're able to pretty much convincingly win the first points. You guys are moving the point around the corner. UV has a complete blind spot. He cannot see anyone. And you can see, or at least hear, that the enemies are relatively close. If you're UV, you can't be a squishy sitting in the middle of the point with no movement abilities. With Kiriko, you could have done that. But when they're relatively close and you have a blind spot and you can't see the enemies, you have to either walk into the room here or just kite back to point, let somebody else push. Initially, I think you should have tried to at least scout by jumping on top of the turret, together with Admiral. So the problem with this play is that the window was kind of blind. It was all right, but Yubi didn't really see the enemies properly. And also, it seems like nobody was even ready to capitalize on that window. It seems like Yubi and Kafa were playing a 2-on-4 there. They jumped. Where's Lethal? Where's Maimon? Where's Admiral? Usually, guys explode together like you did in first point. But this window play, nobody was prepared for it. Kafa kind of overextended, but he was confident he could get the kill. And they just like, the enemy BAP played it really well, popping a window and killed him. Here, try to initiate a play with a beat. It's alright. But Kappa overextends here and then dies. So Geekay loses this fight, and what really bothered me is that UV was contesting the third position. It's a very strong, powerful position because, you know, the high ground creates a very, very strong off angle. The problem that I had is that essentially UV was contesting it alone when Admiral could have helped him contest it. And I also think they gave up the position way too easily. Like, they could have taken the position from them, or at least pushed them back and then drop from that position, but not let them have the high ground there. This time, for example, you can see contesting that position together, and you manage to force them back.
This ends now.
Notice that in the past two maps, you are making a lot of mistakes in overtime. You're trying too hard to make a play. Kaffa uses his Nemesis form way too early. You guys have two defensive, a window and a beat, and they only have a beat. They use overclock. Okay, it's fine. You guys can, after someone uses Nemesis form, what you guys could have done is pop a window, try to fight a soldier, or even beat and try to run them over, which then would allow you to pop your window from a more aggressive position, and you probably win that fight, right? Or you pop a window, they kind of run back, or they try to fight with overclock, and then you beat. But like when you make the call, I have defensive ulti, let them push in so I can beat, or let us get close so I can beat. This also forces Lethal, when he's an individual player, he's listening to this and he's like, oh, okay, like we're going to beat, we're going to widow. Let me play more passive. I'm not going to try to force to make a play. So this is pretty much the first team fight. Actually, you won the previous one. This is the second team fight. You guys have been holding defense. The average code will see this and be like, yeah, UV used his lamp half a second later. If you only used it a little bit earlier, Lethal wouldn't have died. These things happen all the time from even the best teams in the world. You actually play the defense here quite well. And the reason for that is that you don't let Falcons take angles for free. You constantly apply pressure from multiple angles. And because you're constantly applying pressure from multiple angles, you don't let them set up to collapse on you together. Now, what is the problem is that Lethal is holding a very aggressive, good position, but he's doing it alone. I'm not sure where Admiral here. I think he's behind UV, but Admiral should definitely be with Lethal and prevent him from being denied that angle. Because what could really the enemies do if they don't have the left side angle? They're now sitting down main like headless chicken and get shot from multiple angles because you guys have more cover to play around. They are the ones sitting in open space in that little corner. You guys are the ones that can initiate like a huge collapse on them. But if they take the left side, you guys are in a problem. But if you don't give them left side, you guys have the advantage. And Admiral should have definitely been there with Lethal. And this kind of resembles the Circuit Royale when UV pushed from the high ground by himself. And also here on this map on attack where UV tried to take the turret by himself, where he could have taken it with Admiral together and deny the power positions from them. But you're probably thinking, if there are two on the left, can't they jump on UV? No, because UV already notices that. He creates distance. If they try to jump on him, he just kites back. Look at his positioning. You try to bring this back after Lethal has died, and you actually do quite well. Now imagine if Lethal was alive, and you guys also had a lamp. You clearly have a positional advantage here, and he would have collapsed on them, and he would have won that fight. It's a really good window by UV here. Notice that when the enemies are relatively close and it has the element of surprise, there's a lot of value coming out of the windows. Now compare it with UV's Kitsune's. No element of surprise, doing it from far away, and that's the difference here. This was kind of unfortunate that Yuvi got stuck here on the vortex and he got stuck on the terrain and couldn't jump. But also, Kafa is kind of isolated here. He went for a very, very long walk. He hasn't been doing damage for a while. He's completely isolated here.
This ends now.
Notice that at the last two maps, the more it's closer to overtime, the more mistakes you're making. UV was caught in open space and forced to use his lamp. That wasn't that big of a deal. But then Merit uses his overclock, and Kafa is trying to overcompensate by playing super aggressive. When in reality, there's not much that he needs to do besides like kind of go up and down and contest point. They're in a very disadvantageous position when they have to sit at the bottom of the point. And also, when you think about it, what did Merit's overclock even do? What did he have? He was sitting on the high ground, and it would be suicide to try to push the high ground across the entire high ground into a BAP, Soj, Hazard. They're in open space. So if he pushed there with overclock, he would have died probably. So he can't really push. The overclock is wasted. Kappa has just to go up and down contest point, and after they commit all of these ultis, you guys can play with your own window and your own cooldowns. So all you had to do, in short, is to play patiently, force them to make mistakes, which they clearly did, and then capitalize with your own ultimates and cooldowns because they make the mistakes. So if I had to summarize the entire feedback, number one, Kappa sometimes tends to overextend. This happens more prominently on Hazard. That being said, I like his levels of aggression, and a key part of why Geekay is able to take so many angles is because of Kafa. But sometimes he has to flick his mouse to actually check if he can overextend there, because sometimes you get a little bit too tunnel vision. Number two, when you want to contest strong off angles, you don't want to do it alone. Have someone with you. And Admiral, when he's playing Lucio, should be the one that is the connector. So he's the one that is constantly going to the person that needs to contest the angle. When Lethal is sitting on the left, Admiral goes to the left. When UV wants to contest high ground, Admiral needs to go to the high ground. When Hazard needs some help in the front line, Admiral goes up in the front line. Number three, the closer you guys get to overtime, the more mistakes you make. The enemies also make a mistake. So you have two options here. Number one, you make a collective explosive play. So when the enemies get close, you try to explode on them on overtime and capitalize on the fact that they are usually under the disadvantage or they're not expecting the element of surprise. Or number two, you play very patiently, you force them to use cooldowns and ultimate, and then capitalize with yours. This is especially more prominent when you're defending, because when you're defending, you can kind of like jump around the point and play it patiently and utilize cooldown to protect the point when you're Hazard or when you're a Matra. When you do this half measure that some play aggressively and some not, you just get destroyed. So, like at the attack, for example, it's Lethal who tried to make a play with Maimon, completely separated from the team, and you guys messed up because some played defensively, some played aggressively. On this defense, you guys are playing more defensive because UV has to play defensive, but Kafa is playing aggressive. And when you do it like kind of halfway, not all together on the same page, you guys just get destroyed because only few of you are making a mistake, which then they're able to capitalize on as a team. To clarify, don't give them free space and take angles. It just don't be overly aggressive and forced to use your cooldowns and ultimates for no reason.